these are not the models you're looking for. Just in case you didn't understand the costume, the lightsaber, and stuff like that, this is the idea. The idea is that I will use the force, maybe, to convince you that you should do models differently to how you're used to doing them on Angular 1 or Angular 2. So again, the talk is, these are not the models you're looking for. But before starting, let me actually introduce myself. My name is Martin Gontovnikas, and my Twitter handle is mgonto. I'm a software developer from Buenos Aires, Argentina. You might notice from my accent that I'm not from here. And I work at OutZero. OutZero is a SaaS that helps you with authentication and authorization. So basically, if you want to add logins to your Angular 1 app or Angular 2 app with like username and password, or social stuff like Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, or enterprise stuff like SAML, Active Directory, LDAP, you can do it with it. If you want to know more about it, you can come talk to me after the talk. And I used to be there coding JavaScript all day long. So basically, this was me. I was just like coding all day long. But now I work as a developer advocate there. A lot of people ask me, what does it mean to be a developer advocate? And basically, it's the same that I used to do when I was 17 years old. But instead of singing in a karaoke, which I do very, very poorly, but I still do it because I love it, now I travel around the world, basically speaking at conferences. But in order to speak, you still have to code. So let's actually start with the talk. But before starting, I want to tell you something. Like, throughout this entire conference, you have seen lots of talks about RxJS, observables, FRPs, streams, event streams, and stuff like that. And you may have heard that from this guy. But now he's not that cool. He's not that hipster. He doesn't have a beard, but we love him anyway. And what I want to say is that all of that is really nice. I like RxJS. I like observables. I actually did a talk with Ben Lesh about RxJS and observables. And I do love them, and I do use them on my application. But this talk is about another approach. So observables, RxJS, a lot about immutability. This talk is all about mutability and making mutable models and behavior and stuff like that. So what I think about these two approaches is something like this. Like, we can all hold hands and be friends together. Some of us can do RxJS, some of us can do observables, and then some of us can do mutability, behavior, and models. Please notice that I searched a lot for the Darth Vader in the hand. It has to be Star Wars themes, the talk now. It required a lot of work. So this talk is basically about something obvious that is not really that obvious. So I always like to start talks and everything in general with a question. And that question would bring me to a problem that then I try to solve or find the different solutions that I can see for it. So in this case, my question was, what is a model in your Angular app? I put an example for Angular 1 and one for Angular 2 as of how we regularly do models. So how do we do it? Is it big enough? This is what I like about doing presentations on HTML and CSS. You just zoom in Chrome, and it works. So this is Angular 1 model. Basically, it's a home controller that we all know. It has the scope that I know that nobody knows what the scope is anymore. It's dead, right? No, we hate it. But the scope was the glue between the view and the controller. And we have here this person model, this person object, which has the name, in this case Gonto, and the company. What we can see here is that Angular actually lets us do models however we want. So Angular tells us about services, factories, and a lot of stuff, but it doesn't tell us anything about models. They give us complete freedom. And what we usually do is something like this. We create a plain old JavaScript object. It's a regular JavaScript object which just has two fields. And that's it. And then what I have in this case is this other function that is called change name. If we think of the view for this controller, it's basically an input type text where you enter your name, and then a button that clicks change your name. When you click on there, it will come to this function. And in this case, it's just doing a validation. If your name that you're changing to is Martin, it will say, no Martins are allowed. You shall not pass. So it's a validation that is telling you you cannot change this name. However, otherwise, it just changes the name. And that's all that we have here. We have the behavior of changing the name and the model, which is just two fields. So how do we do this same thing in Angular 2? Now we get a little bit more fancy because you have classes. But we're not doing classes, really. I mean, this class is just two fields. It's two attributes. It's name and company. It's basically the same as before, but now we have to instantiate it and set the fields. So, ooh, it's classes. But in reality, it's not classes. It's just name and company. And what we have is the same. We have this user app component, and we have this change name, which, again, validates. And if everything works OK, it just changes the name of the person. So my first problem is, my first question is, do you see any problems with this? Good. That's one of the problems, exactly. That's another one. We'll see now a few of them. So, but before actually talking about the problems, let me ask you something. Do you remember what an ERD is, the entity relationship diagram? I know what you're thinking. No, please don't tell me. Please don't make me remember about ERD. And since I know we all hate ERDs, I'm going to do T-shirt time because I love what Shai was doing. So if you know Shai, it's his idea. If you don't know Shai, it's, of course, my idea. So this time I actually brought JSON Web Token T-shirts. It's this one. And it says JWT.io in the back. So I'll throw a few. I'm getting better at throwing T-shirts. Let's do, I have, I think, 5 more. I should, yeah. I'm not that good. It never goes after like line 6, maybe. OK, sorry. Not my intention. So this is an ERD. Basically, what it has are different entities, and each of those entities has attributes or fields. So if my teacher at college would hear me, he would kill me, but basically an entity is a table in a database. The ERD was created when databases were created, and it was a way of showing tables and database. So what we have here, for example, is the table application, which has several fields or several columns. It has app number, app type, sponsor applicant, etc. For our example, it would be the person table or the person entity, and the columns would be name and company. And each of the rows would be each of you here. So for me, it would be name Martin or Gonto, and company it would be auth0. So this is basically what we have right now for an ERD. And it was invented tons and tons and tons of years ago in a galaxy far, far away, right? And what this shows is that an entity is just data. An entity or these tables are just data. That's all it is. So this is very similar to what we were doing in our Angular 1 and Angular 2 sample. We were creating a plain old JavaScript object with 2 fields. In here, it's one table with 2 columns. So let me ask you another thing. If we go back to the future, a little bit later, after ERDs, somebody invented this class diagram. I know what you're saying. Please, no more of these graphics, no more of these diagrams. Please shut up. But let's actually see it. And this is actually pretty similar to the ERD. But now we have another like line here. Do you remember in Angular 1 there was the dot model rule? You had to have 2 models. The class diagram is the 2 lines rule. You have 2 lines. So in here you have the entity or the class name. You then have, again, the fields. But then you have something else. For example, for seminar, you have the fields which are name, seminar number, and fees. But then you have this add student and drop student. So what are those? That's actually behavior that this model has. Because this model knows how to do something because it's his responsibility to actually do something. If we go back to this person example, the person will have the name and company fields because that's the state, that's the data that this model, that this class have. But then we have this change name method. And this change name method, we actually used to have it in the controller itself. And the thing is that the responsibility of changing the name should be mine. It shouldn't be in the controller, because I know how to change my name, and I know how to change my state. I know how to mutate my values, my fields, so that they change from now and forever. So for example, my real name is Martin, but I'm sorry, ma'am, but I hate it. I hate the name Martin. I like to be called Gonto. So if I want to change my name from now on, what that means is that I want to sign everything saying Gonto. Every time I go to Starbucks and they ask me my name, I want to say Gonto. So whose responsibility is to say that from now on, I will be Gonto? It's basically mine. And what I'm doing is I'm changing my name. So I'm changing the person's name from Martin to Gonto. And what I'm doing for that is using this change name method. So this behavior should be in the person itself. The ability and the responsibility to mutate my behavior is mine. I should change it. So it should be there. So what this means is that both in real life, as together in this guy who thought about this class diagram, a model has both state and behavior. So it has data and information, as well as some behavior that will change its state or its data throughout time. So let's actually go back in time a little bit, and let's go again to the question, what is a model in your Angular 2 app? So again, we had this class person, name and company, and we had this change name in the component. If we think about this again, this class, this model, has only data. And we change it throughout time, so it does mutate, but we change it from the component or the controller. Shouldn't we do that from the person? Shouldn't the person be the one who is doing this? So my question is, do you see why it's not good now? Do you see the problem? And some of those points would be, first, it doesn't mimic the real world. I know it sounds like silly, but if we think about it, it basically is different from the real world if we want to do RxJS or observable. It's like switch map. What is that? Who invented that name? Really, does that work? Flat map latest, that does something? I've never heard of it. And the other thing is that it doesn't follow the dry principle. Because if I have this change name behavior in 5 controllers, then I have to copy and paste that behavior into the 5 controllers. And then if I have a bug in one, I'll have the bug in the others. But now you will say, but Gonto, I can create a service, and then that service will have that behavior in one place, and then I can reutilize it. And then I say, let me click next. So if that's what we do, behavior is still spread throughout the entire application. So what that means is that now I have a service that changes the name. Then I have a service that changes my age because I want to be younger. Then I have another service that does another thing. And if we have that, whenever I want to actually modify the person, I have to go and see 5 different classes, 5 different JavaScript files which have behavior. So if I want to modify a person file because I found a bug in myself, I want to actually see that person and see all of the behavior and all of the things that that person does. Because then I just go to this person.js file and I see, oh, this dude has a name and a company, and he also can change his age, and he also can change his name. I want to see that in just one place. Like if you remember, for example, ng router or UI router, there was a recommendation saying that you should create a module per page, and in that page, you should have the routes for that page only. So that was a recommendation by Angular 1 to do routes. And it's basically the same as this. In one file, I have the routes, the controller, and the view. In here, in one file, I have the fields, the attributes, the properties, and the different methods. Then the other thing is that Angular did ng required in the view, or validations in the view. Really? Are we doing validations in the view? What if there's like the view is in 3 different places, and we only do validations in one of them? Then it's OK. Martin can change his name to -1, because who cares? He can be called -1, right? And that actually doesn't work. So we should have the validations in the model. The model is responsible of knowing if it's valid or not at its current state or at the state that you actually want to change it to. The other thing is that we can't share models with the backend. So you may have heard from actually like Patrick and Jeff about Angular full stack. And if you want to share your models with the backend and do like a Node.js application instead of an Angular 2 one, you can just do that and have that same model be shared among the 2 of them. So now I'll use the force to convince you that I'm actually right. But just in case the force doesn't work, I'll do a live demo of how we can actually change one application, one Angular 2 applications from one model that is not really a model to a model that is really a model. So let's actually start this out. Gulp play. Cool. So this is the application. You can see that I'm a really great designer, really great. And what it does is it asks me my name. So it's Martin. It asks me my email, gonto@auth0.com. And then based on the languages that I know, it will save to the server, so basically output in the console. I don't know if I can actually increase this size. Do you know if I can increase the console size? OK. Oh, got it. Magic. So it's basically now saving in the server, so putting in the console this rating 30. If I now select Ruby and I click Submit, it now says rating 50. So let's see what the application is actually doing. So if we come to the code, we have this app.ts, which has basically the form, the input fields, and I can enter the name, the email, JavaScript, Ruby, PHP. And then I have in here this submit, which will basically create this user object. It will say the name and the email, and then the rating will be calculated by calling this calculate rating function. This calculate rating function should actually be in the model, not in the controller. So that's the first thing that we're going to do. So how do we change it? We do something that we developers love, copy and paste. So let's copy this. And let's now go to our model. And in here, let's actually paste it. So boom, first step done. Now what we want is the user to be responsible of creating itself. So for that, we need to add a constructor. So let's add a constructor. What should this constructor receive? It should receive the user information with the name, the email, and all the languages that he knows. So let's say this will receive user info. And then in here, what I do is basically this.name equals userinfo.name, this.email equals userinfo.email, and this.rating equals this.calculate rating of user info. And that should be it. So now if we come back here, now we can delete what I copied, because it's not here anymore. And now we can just remove all of this and say that the user will actually be a user of user info. And that's it. I just created it. So if we come back here and refresh, my name, gonto@auth0.com. I know JavaScript. I click Submit. And it's still working. I click Ruby. It's still working. Woo! Next one. So now that we're saving, now that we have it, we have this console log user, which is the HTTP request. It's saving the user. And the user should, again, be the one who is responsible of saving itself. So again, let's cut and paste. So now in the user, we'll have this save method, which will basically call the HTTP request, which in this case just does this console log. So if we come back here, we put user.save, and it should still work. The fans of my computer have started. Every time I do Angular 2, it's So let's try it again. I know JavaScript, submit, and it's still working. It's still saving. And another thing that I can actually show you here is that, so now we have this save function in the user. But what if we actually save all of the different entities, user, very bad, cars, trucks, the same way? We can actually have a base model that does all of this saving for me. So let's actually, again, cut and paste. We are going to cut this save, and we're going to add it into a base model. So we're creating a new class called base model. We add this in here. And now our user will extend from this base model. And we'll call the constructor from the parent from here. And that's it. Now we don't have the save method in the user, but it will still work, because it's created in the base model from which I actually inherit. So again, I refresh, Gonto. I click on JavaScript, submit, and it's still saving. Last thing I want to show you is that we have this button that says get user. So this get user is doing an HTTP request again. This HTTP request is basically just creating an object. And getting the user from the server should also be the user's responsibility. However, the user itself, one instance of the user, doesn't know how to get another user, because the one who knows how to get any user is the class itself, not an instance. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually ask, instead of this, we're going to just ask the user class to get a new user for me. So get user by name and Gonto. Notice the difference that in this case, it's getting the user from this class instead of from the instance. So now let's actually copy and paste this. Now we come here, and we're going to create a method, but differently. It will be a public static method, because it's a method from the class that is called getUserByName. It receives the name, which is of type string. And then all it will do is, for now, is just return a new user, since it's not doing really an HTTP request. And we're going to say that name equals hey, and then email equals hey@hey.com. And finally, I know JavaScript. And that's it. Now we come here, and it's basically the same as we're doing. So let's actually try it out. We refresh, we click on get user, and I'm getting this hey@hey.com. So it worked. Now the user is actually getting all of this information. So my time is up, so I'll try to finish soon. So that's all, basically. Only one last thing that I want to tell you is that if you guys want to try out Auth0, you can. It's auth0.com/signup. And that's it. Thank you for listening.